Hello everyone, this is Swati. In my last PowerPoint, we covered nutrition in amoeba, that is unicellular organisms. Today, we are going to cover nutrition in plants and animals. My first question is, why do we eat food? Yes, we eat food because it gives us energy. And why do we need energy? Yes, of course, for daily routine activities and for the life processes. Now, let's find out what is the definition of nutrition. Nutrition is a process where food is taken inside that produces energy which is required for different metabolic activities of our body. Now, the question arises, what is a metabolic activity? Metabolic activities are the chemical processes that occurs within a living organism in order to maintain life. All the chemical processes that occurs inside are called metabolic activities. Now these metabolic activities are of two types. One is catabolic and another one is anabolic activity. So the question arises, what is anabolic activities? Anabolic activities are all those activities that synthesizes something. And catabolic activities are the activities that helps in breakdown of something. So anabolic is related to synthesis and catabolic is related to breakdown. Now the question is that for both these activities, anabolic and catabolic, specifically we are talking about metabolic activities, we need energy so that this synthesis and this breakdown can take place. So the food that we eat has different nutrients and these nutrients provides us energy. Now what are the different nutrients our food contains? It contains carbohydrates, it contains proteins, fats, vitamins and minerals. Apart from them, it also contains roughage. Now what is roughage? Roughage is basically the fibrous indigestible material which is present in vegetable foodstuff and which helps in the passage of food and waste product through the gut. And how do we get this roughage? From where do we get this roughage? We get it from fresh fruits, we get it from bread, wholemeal bread, because they are the important sources of roughage in our diet. As you can see in the picture, that it shows a good balance of the diet, or we can call it balanced diet. For that, we need to intake green vegetables, legumes, calcium-rich foods, fruits, very important, whole grains, and other colorful vegetables as well. Now let's talk about the types of nutrition. We are going to cover autotrophic and heterotrophic, and we all are familiar to these two terms. Let's talk about autotrophic mode of nutrition. What does the term auto means? Auto means self. So autotrophic nutrition is a process in which the organism produces their food on their own with the help of very simple inorganic materials like water, like carbon dioxide, mineral salts, and most important, sunlight. So they make their food with the help of these elements, and the process, what do we call the process? It is photosynthesis, by which we all are familiar with. And there is one thing we need to talk about here, that is chlorophyll. What is chlorophyll? It is a photosynthetic pigment which helps in trapping this solar energy from the sun and converts it into chemical energy. Now the question arises here that this autotrophic nutrition can be seen only in green plants because they contain chlorophyll. What about other plants? What about non-green plants? They do not make their own food by the process of photosynthesis. No, this is not true to some extent. The non-green plants also make their food by the process of photosynthesis, but the problem is that they can produce chlorophyll, They have this ability of producing chlorophyll, absorbs the sunlight for food, but they do not look green. Why? Because they contain other pigments also in them that mask their green color, and which makes them red, which makes them purple. That is why, because the quantity of other pigments is comparatively more than green, they mask the green color and they do not look green. But it's not true that they do not synthesize their food. To some extent, they undergo this photosynthesis process. Okay, now let's talk about heterotrophic nutrition. What is the meaning of hetero here? Hetero means dependent. That means it's a type of nutrition where the organism depends on other organisms for their survival, and they have to take in all the organic substances they need to survive. And why they're not able to synthesize their own food? Because they do not contain any photosynthetic pigment. They do not contain chlorophyll or any other photosynthetic pigment. So because of the absence of it, they cannot synthesize their own food, and that is why we call them heterotrophic, or you can say heterotrophs. Now, there are different modes by which the heterotrophs obtain their food. Either these heterotrophs can act as parasites, they can act as saprophytes, or they can show holozoic mode of nutrition. As you can see in this picture, it's a picture showing mushrooms, which shows saprophytic mode of nutrition. Then there is this picture showing mode of nutrition in amoeba, which is a holozoic in nature. And as you can see in this picture, it's a cuscuta plant that acts as a parasite, and that means it shows parasitic mode of nutrition. Let's learn more about them. Let's start with what are saprophytes. They are actually the organisms. They feed on dead and decaying matter. Now, what is this dead and decaying matter? It basically needs to be organic in nature. For example, fungi. As you can see in this picture, it's a mushroom that belongs to the family of fungi. Now, how the question arises, how they obtain their food? They have this capacity to release, to secrete enzymes from their body surface, and then they can convert the complex food material into a simple form. Now, what is the meaning of simple form? It means which is soluble in nature, and so that they can absorb it from their body surface. Now, let's talk about parasites. Parasites are the organisms that live in or on the surface of other organisms so that their nutritional requirement can be fulfilled. In this term parasite, there is this term para. What is the meaning of para here? Para basically means either on or in. So there is an example I have shared here, an example of E. coli bacteria, which acts like a parasite, and it is present in our human intestine. That means this is a host. So what is a host? An organism in which the parasite lives. It can be inside the body of the host, it can be on the body of host. So what happens here, that this E. coli bacteria is present in our body, and it takes all the nutrition from our body. So if now this parasite, we can call it as ecto or endo. What does that mean? If a parasite lives on the organism, it is called ectoparasite, and if inside the organism, it is called endoparasite. Okay. Now, holozoic mode of nutrition. We have covered this mode of nutrition in my previous video, in my previous PowerPoint, where we talked about the mode of nutrition in amoeba, which is holozoic mode of nutrition. So what is basically holozoic? It's like there is an organism that follows 5 steps of sequence. What is that? ingestion of food, digestion of food, absorption, assimilation, and egestion of undigested material from the body. And this kind of holozoic mode of nutrition can be observed in herbivorous, carnivores, and omnivorous organisms. So, as we have already covered ingestion, digestion, absorption, assimilation, and egestion, let's go through them once again. Ingestion is basically the food is taken inside with the help of mouth, and digestion is that it is converted into a simple and soluble form with the help of different enzymes present inside the body. It is then absorbed by the body, and then this is converted into some fluid or solid substance inside the body so that they can provide nutrition to the body. And the undigested part is then of the food is then removed from the body, which is called egestion. Let's talk about digestive system of human. Human, as we know, is a heterotroph, and it shows a holozoic mode of nutrition. So basically, digestive system contains two parts: alimentary canal and associated glands with it. So as you can see in the picture that this is the alimentary canal we are going to talk about, and then you can see that there is a liver attached with it, there is pancreas and a small intestine, large intestine, rectum, anus, stomach. So and yes, salivary glands also. So they are the associated glands in our digestive system which helps in the digestion. Let's find out what is an alimentary canal here. So basically this alimentary canal is a 9-meter long tube which starts from mouth and then ends up at anus, starting from mouth ending at anus. And basically the organs, they are in the following sequence. It starts with mouth as said, which is important for mechanical and chemical digestion. Then comes esophagus, or you can say food pipe, then stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and then rectum and anus for the egestion process. So this is, as said, a tube-like structure, which then leads to esophagus, or you can also call it food pipe. Then comes stomach. Stomach is basically J-shaped. It looks similar to J alphabet. And then comes small intestine, which is also called tubule because it's a tube-like structure. And there is one fact related to it, that small intestine is the largest part of alimentary canal, though we write small, but it is the largest part of alimentary canal. Why? Because it is approximately 4.5 meter from this 9 meter. So that makes it unique. And then comes large intestine, which helps in absorption of water, and also it helps in the removal of undigested part of the food, which is done by rectum and anus. Let's now talk about what are the parts of small intestine and large intestine. So if I talk about small intestine, it has three parts: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. And if I talk about this large intestine, it again has three parts. It is cecum, colon, and rectum. Very first gland that we are going to cover is salivary gland. This salivary gland, as you can see in the picture, is present in mouth and it contains saliva. Now this saliva contains an enzyme which is called ptyalin amylase. This P is silent here, ptyalin amylase, or you can say salivary amylase. What is the function of this enzyme here? This enzyme converts the starch present in all the food we intake into maltose. So the starch, all the starch that is present in the food is converted into maltose with the help of ptyalin amylase that is contained by the saliva. Okay. Next, we will talk about gastric gland, which secretes gastric juices. One by one, we are going to cover all of them. First of all, we will talk about pepsin. Now, this pepsin helps in conversion of protein into peptones. All the protein that is taken inside is converted into peptones with the help of pepsin, an enzyme. Now, there is one thing very important for this pepsin to work, that it can only work in the presence of acidic medium. Now, this acidic medium is provided by HCl. And this HCl, as you know, that if HCl, for example, falls on your hand, it will burn your hand. So just think about it, that this HCl is inside our stomach. So and still it does not affect our stomach. Why? Because of the presence of mucus, which lines the wall of the stomach so that it can be prevented from HCl. And this HCl thus can work for giving the acidic medium to pepsin so that protein can be converted into peptones. Now there is another one also, which is renin. It helps, or you can say it helps in the conversion of milk into curd. You can see in the picture that there is a gastric pit. There are mucus cells which protect the stomach from this acid, and there are chief cells, there are G cells which helps in the protection. Next, we are going to talk about pancreatic gland, which secretes pancreatic juices. As you can see in the picture, it is present below the stomach. So, this pancreas releases three kinds of enzymes: pancreatic amylase, pancreatic trypsin, and pancreatic lipase. So, pancreatic amylase helps in conversion of starch to maltose, and pancreatic trypsin helps in conversion of proteins. As you know that in my previous slide, we have seen that pepsin converts into peptones in the presence of acidic medium provided by HCl. Now these peptones are converted to peptides with the help of trypsin, and lipase helps in the conversion of fat to fatty acids and glycerol. Next is liver. Liver is the largest gland in our body and it helps in digestion. Why? Because it basically secretes bile juice, and which contains salts and pigments, different salts and pigments. And generally these salts and pigments, or you can say bile juice, helps in emulsification of fats. Now what is emulsification of fats? That the bigger molecules of fat, they are converted into smaller ones. And one more thing which is very important here, that liver also secretes bicarbonate ions that helps in making the medium alkaline. As we studied that there is acidic medium in stomach which helps in enabling of the enzymes. But here in the liver there are bicarbonate ions which provide alkaline medium so that these enzymes, this emulsification can take place. And then as you can see in the picture that there is this gallbladder which is inside the liver, which helps in storing temporarily all the secretion that has occurred from liver. Okay, next is ileum, which is also called as intestinal gland. I hope you remember that we talked about the parts of small intestine: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. So this is the third one. The last part is ileum, where there are glands present. As you can see in the picture on the walls here, that these are the glands present in ileum. They are also called intestinal glands because they are present in the intestine. So they also helps in releasing of mixture of juices. And there is one term which is actually not in your syllabus, but let me tell you about it. There is one term called for it, that is succus entericus, the mixture of juices released by the glands in ileum. We call it succus entericus. We do not need to talk about it right now. There are different enzymes released by the glands present here. The very first one is erepsin, and which helps in the conversion of peptides, the proteins to peptides, to now in amino acids, and lipase to that converts fat to fatty acids, maltase into maltose to glucose, lactose to galactose. We are now going to talk about the physiology, wherein the very first process is digestion, as it is written here, that it is a process where food is taken inside and it is churned with the help of teeth present inside the mouth. So basically, whatever food we eat, it is churned. That means it grinds into smaller particles, which is done with the help of teeth. And here, saliva also plays an important role for the grinding of the food particles, the bigger particles into smaller particles, so that the next step, which is digestion, it becomes easy. And this process wherein saliva comes into the picture and helps in churning of the food we eat, it is called as mastication of the food. I am repeating it again, mastication of the food. Now, let's talk about digestion. As it is written here that in mouth, saliva is secreted through salivary gland present, and it contains amylase, which helps in digestion of starch, where the starch, the most of the starch is converted into maltose, as we have discussed it in the previous slides. And this masticated food is then rolled into bolus. So what is this bolus? It is basically such a form of food that can be swallowed. So basically the food we eat is churned with the help of the teeth and saliva, and it is converted into such a form of food that can be swallowed. Now the question is that whatever food we eat, when it is converted into this bolus form with the help of esophagus, does it fall directly into the stomach? No, it does not directly fall into the stomach. It's not like that you eat and it directly goes to the stomach. No, there is a term here, that is peristaltic movement. This peristaltic movement is the slow movements of the food that occurs here in esophagus, and there is slow movement, or we can also call it the rhythmic contraction and relaxation of the muscular walls here, so that food slowly goes into the stomach. And this is a 1 mark question. This came this year in board examination also. It was a 5 mark question on the whole, where they talked about what is nutrition and how do we get nutrition, how nutrition provides us energy, why this energy is used, how this energy is used, what type of contraction and relaxation takes place, what is the movement of the food. So you all should know about it. This is quite important. So this process, as it is written here, is peristaltic movement, or you can say peristalsis of the food here. Okay. So as we have studied that in stomach there are gastric juices which are secreted, and we also studied about this, that there is mucus which is present on the wall of the stomach to protect it from HCl, which provides acidic medium so that pepsin can work, pepsin can function. And the function of pepsin is to convert proteins, all the proteins we take, into peptones. Then there is renin that changes the milk into curd. This conversion of milk into curd is basically coagulation of milk. This is not a typical curd we eat, not that. It is the coagulation of milk so that it is converted into a simplified form. And then the most important thing is here, that this food remains in stomach for about 3 to 4 hours, basically for 3 hours, and then it is passed, then it goes to the very first part of small intestine. If you remember, we call it duodenum. And what happens here, that as it goes into the first part of small intestine, which is duodenum, it goes in the form of chyme. You remember we studied a term that was bolus. So that the term bolus means a form of food which can be swallowed. Here in duodenum, it goes in the form of chyme. So now, as you can see in the picture, that there is a mouth like we studied earlier, which helps in digestion. Then there is esophagus that helps in peristaltic movement, so that slowly food goes into the stomach. And here in stomach, there is mucus that mines the stomach wall, that helps in protection of it. So let's move to next slide, where in duodenum there are bile juices, there are bicarbonate ions which are secreted from liver, and there are pancreatic juices which are secreted from pancreas. We have covered it in previous slides. So this bile juice helps in emulsification of fats, which we have studied, which means the bigger molecules, the complex molecules are converted into simplified ones so that they can be absorbed and utilized for energy. Now bicarbonate ions to work, all the pancreatic juices, the enzymes, they need to work, and they can work in the presence of alkaline medium, which is provided by bicarbonate ions, which is secreted by bile juice, or you can say by liver. So there are pancreatic juices. Now we have already talked about this also, that amylase, which helps in conversion of starch into maltose, all the starch we intake. Then there is trypsin, which helps in the conversion of peptones to peptides, and this peptones we got from pepsin, which converts proteins to peptones, trypsin, peptones to peptides. So it's a 1-mark question. We should learn it properly. Then there is lipase, which helps in the conversion of fat into fatty acids and glycerol. Now the food passes from jejunum to ileum. They are the next part of small intestine. And now in this ileum, this intestinal juice is secreted, which helps in the complete digestion of the food. And conversion of this food into a soluble form, or you can say a simplified form, that is, proteins are converted into amino acids, fat molecules are converted into fatty acids, and starch into glucose. The next step is absorption. Here there are, for more and better absorption, there are small finger-like projections. You already have studied about this in grade 7, I suppose. They are called villi. And what is the function of villi here? It's a 1 or 2 marks question. Let me tell you. They actually increase the surface area for absorption so that more food can be absorbed and more energy can be produced. This absorbed food then passes into blood, and then they diffuses into the body cells so that energy is produced, which is the next part here, assimilation, whereas energy is produced from all the absorbed food. Last is digestion, wherein the undigested food, it first of all passes from large intestine. The remaining water is absorbed, and this undigested food is, it passes from cecum, which is one part of the large intestine, to colon, which is another part of large intestine, and finally to rectum, where it is thrown out of the body in the form of fecus, and it is digested through anus, as we all know about it. So now let's talk about this disorder, which we call as peptic ulcer. It's a disorder when mucous membrane, or the stomach, mucous membrane which protects the stomach, gets corroded because of the acid. So what basically this is, that this is actually when excess of acid is secreted inside the stomach, and this mucus is corroded, and this acid directly comes in contact with the stomach. So it affects stomach, which causes ulcers. So as you can see in the picture, there is this lady who is vomiting because the stomach wall is corroded because of excess production of acid, and the food, whatever food is eaten, is not properly digested, and sometimes the person vomits, and there are other ill effects of the same as well. So Thank you for watching. So I'm sure that this is going to help you all a lot. We have tried our best to cover most important topics that generally come in board examinations in 1, 2, 3, and 5 marks. So keep watching. In my next PowerPoint, I'm going to cover the next life process, that is respiration. Stay tuned. Take care.